What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. Tonight's topic is tilt. If you've played pinball for any length of time, you know that if you shake the machine enough, either the game will end or you'll lose the ball in play. Have you ever thought about how that tilt mechanism works, or when it was invented? Believe it or not, the earliest pinball games did not have tilt mechanisms. Harry Williams invented the tilt mechanism in 1934, and it was first used on a game called Advance. That Harry Williams is the same Harry Williams that founded Williams Manufacturing Company. Of course, they went on to produce many famous pinball machines over the years. The tilt mechanism is fairly simple and uses the same basic design that Harry Williams conceived in the early 30s. There's a metal ring that's wired in to a tilt relay, usually a trip, and then a plumb bob that hangs down on a wire. And as the machine is nudged and pushes the plumb bob into the ring, it will make electrical contact and trip the relay. It can do this because the wire itself is also tied into the machine's power. Later on, the slam tilt was developed. And this is a switch with a weighted end that, when moved, via moving the machine quickly, it would close and trip the tilt. The next mechanism I don't see any reference to before the early 60s. However, I thought this was invented in the 50s, and that's the roll tilt mechanism. And this simply is a metal cage that a pinball sits in, and if you lift up the front of the machine, the ball will roll until it hits a switch at the end of the cage, which will trip the tilt relay. So why do I care about tilts so much? Well, the answer is because they're vitally important to gameplay in almost any pinball machine, but also in bingos they're especially important. If you tilt, you lose your entire game, and that game can be comprised of many, many, many nickels, building it up in anticipation of a possible payoff. So if you tilt out and lose your entire bet, that can be kind of devastating. For example, I might put in over 20 nickels in order to get the machine to a state where I want to play. That's $1. So losing an entire dollar on one game is pretty rough. So that leads me to the really interesting thing about Bally bingos and the way that they tilted. Bally actually invented many unique and interesting mechanisms that tied into the tilt. In a bingo, you have the normal plumb bob tilt. And this plumb bob is set in a reverse orientation, so the wide bottom of the plumb bob actually sits up towards the top of the wire instead of towards the bottom. And this allows for two things. First of all, it allows for more swinging of the pendulum that the plumb bob sits on. And secondly, if you were to slam the machine in such a way that the set screw were to give, it would drop the plumb bob into the ring, permanently tilting the machine until an operator came by and loosened it up. This is preferable to slamming the machine down and then having free rein to move the machine because the tilt bob is on the bottom of the cabinet. The other thing that Bally had were multiple slam tilt switches. There's one in the bottom of the cabinet, one in the coin door, which is crucial, and one in the back box. So smacking the machine at certain points, if you happen to know what it's doing, would cause things to jump in an odd way and perhaps give you more favorable results. The slam tilt switch in the back box prevents you from doing this. The slam tilt in the coin door prevents you from smacking the coin door super hard in an attempt to get your money back. For whatever reason, the machine just shuts down. Quite the revenge it has. This tradition was carried on, from then on. There are no roll tilt cages in a Bally bingo. However, the way everything ties into the tilt is a little more in-depth in a bingo than it is in other pin games. So, if you were to tilt, there are two things that happen. First of all, it trips the tilt trip, which lights the tilt light on the back glass. Secondly, it makes the anti-cheat relay let go. This anti-cheat relay is crucial to the operation of the bingo. Without it, the numbers on the cards won't light up. When the start relay is energized by putting a coin in, it will lock in the anti-cheat relay until the machine trips. Interestingly, and a measure which is often defeated in a Bally bingo, if the coin mechanism switch is held down for too long, more than an instant, the machine will tilt. And this is to protect the machine. Otherwise, it would constantly be firing the start relay. Tilts in EM games can do various things. In a bingo, I mentioned it ends your game. On my add-a-ball machines, it'll end the ball in play. In some cases, it'll end the ball in play and remove another ball. Usually this is an adjustment that can be made inside the cabinet. In the 1960s, Williams experimented with mercury tilt switches. A mercury tilt switch would work in a very similar way to a ball roll tilt. Old thermostats work this way as well. When the mercury hit the other side of the glass enclosure it was in, it would actually make electrical contact and start the furnace. As the temperature increased, the mercury would roll away, cutting off the furnace. Beyond pinball, many EM arcade games also have tilts. Many are just the simple plumb tilt, and they just prevent you from shaking the cabinet to death after you lose, or before you lose, which would be, I guess, the better time to tilt. As I've mentioned in a previous podcast, kind of cryptically, sometimes tilting is exactly what you want to do. What I meant by that is it can be cathartic. If you've built up all this drama around a particular game, especially in a bingo, sometimes it can be fun to tilt out and lose. I know that's pretty much the opposite of what I said in the beginning, and always the opposite of what you want to do. However, sometimes it lets off just the right amount of steam. Well, thank you for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online at foramusementonly.libsyn.com. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, right on our website, and on Facebook. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.